this is just the beginning.
Welcome to an Axios virtual event on social responsibility and the climate agenda. I'm Mike Allen, a co-founder of Axios, coming to you from Axios HQ in Arlington, Virginia. We're wrapping our Energy Forward series, and we thank GE for making these consequential conversations possible, including this Climate Week programming. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Axios.com. We hope you'll join the conversation on Twitter at Axios, hashtag Axios Events. I'll be joined by my colleague Ben Gieman, an author of Axios Generate newsletter, as we discuss climate innovation for 2022 and beyond. Our first guest is the White House National Climate Advisor. She's worked in both Republican and Democratic administrations. She was the head of the EPA for President Obama. You would never guess this, but she's from Boston, coming to us from DC. Gina McCarthy, welcome to Axios.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be with you.
So the last time that we saw each other, you were behind the wheel of a Chevy Volt, showing how an electric vehicle handles. And I understand you've taken it out for a spin again.
Yes, I took Secretary Granholm for a ride, and myself and Secretary Granholm and Secretary Raimondo drove around in a big electric truck that we didn't drive, but we were passengers of. So we keep trying to make the point that there's some great transportation choices that will get you where you need to go and save the planet and your communities in the meantime.
Before we plunge into our conversation about social responsibility and climate, starting with some news, the Biden administration is mobilizing on extreme heat to help protect people and communities.
Yeah, Mike, we're putting out a really quite multi-agency plan to look at how we address extreme heat. I think everybody's beginning to understand as the president tours the sites of wildfires and flooding and other really big challenges like drought, there's this silent killer for climate change that's called excess heat that really doesn't get enough attention. And we have seen over the past year a record-breaking heat waves all across the United States and frankly the world. But what we saw in the Pacific Northwest was we had hundreds of human beings who lost their lives in this heat wave. We also had thousands more visits to the emergency room, and that's just what gets counted. So we're trying to bring voice to this challenge. We're trying to get every community engaged with us and with their state level governments to figure out how we bring visibility to this and how the federal government can jumpstart efforts all across communities to really address this extreme challenge that climate change poses, because it's not going to get better, Mike. We have to address it. We have to take big steps to protect our workers and our communities.
And I think this announcement is emblematic of your approach. I've covered you now over several jobs and many years. And rather than just talking about saving the planet, you always put it in terms of people.
Yeah, I think this is one example of where everybody can really engage, because what we're seeing is all these extreme weather events are actually impacting 1 out of 3 people's lives just in the past couple of months. So we want to get people engaged, not just in recognizing that climate change is personal. It's about you, your families. It is a kitchen table issue, but also explain that there's things that we can do about this. We can act together. And what you see in this heat stress fact sheet is basically a wealth of actions taken across the whole of government, because that's the joy of the job that President Biden created for me. It wasn't a pigeonhole job where all I did was talk about the science. It was a job that looked at everything that the federal government can do to protect people and our future and deliver our kids a climate safe future. And so there's opportunities in here for labor to do some more standard setting for heat, to enforce more and do compliance more effectively. There's work in there that Health and Human Services are doing, CDC is doing, even NASA's jumping in. There's ways in which we can all work together to keep our communities safe, like cooling centers in our schools. How easy would that be if everybody got together and found ways to make sure that senior citizens were protected and had a safe place to go, or our workers were protected so that our farm workers, our construction workers, in particular in communities of color and low-income communities where we have significant challenges already, and those are the urban areas where heat stress is worse. So we need to do a better job at informing people, but also taking those actions that we can do, including letting LIHEAP money, which is an energy efficiency program that gives money to states to spend. They can actually now spend it on buying air conditioners for senior citizens. How cool is that, pun intended?
I hear you. I saw that coming. So for those tweeting along, climate change is personal. It's a pretty good tweet. Gina, as you look at actions by the administration to incentivize private industry, what can you do to push airlines and others to reduce their emissions?
Well, we found out early along, and we certainly recognize that we have to see where the emissions are coming from now. It's not just about selling a goal and setting a goal in 2035 for clean electricity, which we're doing and we're moving forward on. But it's also about recognizing that transportation is now overtaking the utility industry in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and how important they are. So we started with the car sector. We did a big event where we brought together the big three automakers in the United Auto Workers to basically take a pledge that by 2030 we would have significant investments in clean electricity. We matched that with some opportunities for more charging stations in the president's investment package so that we could try to make sure that 1 out of every 2 cars sold would be electric vehicles. That's going to clean up our air and that's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Then we moved on to the aviation sector. We did a great event a few weeks ago with a whole bunch of the airline industry, and they pledged to actually move forward with new types of aviation fuels, more sustainable fuels. They are putting together, and we're going to support a challenge across the airline industry to see how we can start reducing the air pollution through all kinds of things, like how the grid works and the aviation industry moves, how we can go to airports and make changes there. But it's an exciting opportunity to advance different types of fuels to actually get at a sector which otherwise we're having huge international challenges, and it's only going to get worse over time.
You mentioned the whole of government approach that you take. You're the boss of the National Climate Task Force. What are some of your learnings as you're now 9 months in, I guess?
Well, I'm probably learning that I'm not the boss of much. I'm the coordinator of a lot. And so basically it's 21 cabinet members get together and administrators get together every couple of weeks to talk about what we can do together. And what I've found is this tremendous power in this type of positive action and recognizing that climate impacts everything. So why isn't everybody hanging out? Why can't we get together and look at a bunch of small things and look at our budgets today and the investments we need to make that the president is pushing through his Build Back Better agenda to provide the signal that clean energy is the winner? That's what we're doing with industry. We're not punishing them. We're looking at opportunities for investments in our industry so we can take back some of the supply chains we've lost. We can grow good union jobs in the meantime, and we can find a way to make this transition to clean energy by not just using EPA regulation. Yes, that's important, but also looking at tax incentives, looking at investments in research and innovation, looking at what we know how to do well today and deploying it at scale, while we also use the sort of juice of the federal government and our buying power to actually add value and advance new technologies, new innovations. So So it's an exciting moment where people across the federal government are working together in ways they have never done before, not just to tackle wildfires and droughts and flooding and heat stress, but also to tackle the challenge of how we motivate our business sector and send them all the signals you would want us to send that shows that President Biden is committed to achieving net zero in 2050 and knows that this decade is a decisive decade. If you look at that IPCC report we just got, it is a code red. It is time to act. And he's doing us a great service by going around the country and not just talking about the challenges he's seeing, but the solutions that we can make that will improve all of our lives.
We're about to get the hook here. So penultimate question as you look ahead to the global climate conference in Scotland, about 6 weeks away. Now, the president's climate agenda has been obviously delayed, isn't finally passed. Does that hurt the administration going in, or what do you do to compensate for the fact you don't have everything under your belt that you'd hope to?
Well, we're doing terrific domestic action, and we fully expect that Congress will act within the next couple of weeks, and we'll have a lot to say there. And these are important investments that I think we know are important for our country moving forward, both economically and on climate. But we're not going to rely on that to get us where we need to go. We have the tools that we need available to us to make this the decisive decade, and we're going to keep using them. But we fully expect we'll go into Glasgow with our head held high and with a little bit of an edge to know that we all have to work together right now, because this is the time of our life that we need to actually dedicate all the resources we can to give our kids a healthy future.
And to stick our landing as we say goodbye, what's a simple step, a executable step that a regular person can take to help with these massive problems we've been talking about?
You know, I think the most important thing that you can do right now is to talk to your children and talk to your community leaders. I firmly believe that the more we can talk about climate change and the benefits of the steps that are already available to us to lick this challenge and tackle it, that it will grow the momentum we need. Every change I know starts at the local level, starts with communities banding together and continuing to move forward. And I think young people are going to be the engine that's going to drive us.
Well, Gina McCarthy, I think that next time you should drive that big rig. In the meantime, look forward to seeing you behind the wheel of the Chevy Bolt. And thank you for joining Axios.
Thanks, Mike. It's been great.
Thank you so much. And next, we have a view from the top conversation with my colleague, Axios Vice President of Communications, Yolanda Brignoni.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Yolanda Brignoni, the VP of Communications here at Axios. Our next guest is the Chief Sustainability Officer of GE, Roger Martella, located here in DC. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Yolanda. It's great to see you.
Great for you to be here. Recent years have seen significant growth in the ESG portfolio. Companies are covering more issues more than ever before, and their progress is being more closely measured than ever before. As GE's Chief Sustainability Officer, what issues are you watching most closely?
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our ESG performance and commitments with you. I'm really excited to chat about this. To us, ESG means continuously improving our impacts to our people, our communities, and the planet. Let's take the E for environment. We're focused on addressing climate change, being strong stewards of environmental resources, and the full life cycle of our products. If we take the S for social, focusing on people, starting with our employees, keeping everyone safe, fostering a culture of diversity and inclusion, making sure we're finding opportunities for advancement and development, an ethical supply chain, and proactiveness when it comes to human rights. And if we take the G for governance, this is a commitment to be an ethical, well-run company with a culture of integrity in everything we do. So ESG is really important for sustainability at GE, but it's also more than just improving our impacts. We want to make sure we're part of the solution, that we're innovating the technology the world needs to address these key challenges.
And how are you tackling these challenges?
Well, we're a 129-year-old company, and we've always been focused on a larger purpose: to use innovation to improve the quality of life for people globally. So today, when we think of these challenges, we're focused on three areas with the same approach: delivering technology the world needs today to make progress, while innovating breakthrough technologies for tomorrow. And we start with the energy transition. GE's technology provides for 1/3 of the world's energy, and we're looking to decarbonize the energy sector while making sure we have reliable, sustainable, and affordable energy for the billion people in the world who lack access to energy and everyone else. So again, we're focused on innovation, the most powerful renewable energy technology, making sure that we're building efficient grid systems that can incorporate renewable energy and also prepare us for more severe weather events and cybersecurity, and that we have a very strong backbone of state-of-the-art gas technology to build all of the strong energy ecosystem. We're also looking around the corner to invest in breakthrough technologies we think the world's going to need tomorrow, like small modular nuclear reactors, hydrogen as a fuel, carbon capture and sequestration. Our second sustainability priority is focused on precision healthcare. We want to ensure all people in the world have access to healthcare, including 50% of the world's population that lack access to essential healthcare. Again, we're innovating, making our equipment more accessible, more portable, more reachable for all populations and all kinds of conditions, and using artificial intelligence to deliver results even quicker, more efficiently. And then third, we're focused on the future of flight. COVID has really reinforced the importance of us staying connected. 2/3 of the world's planes fly with GE engines. And again, we're investing in innovation, sustainable aviation fuels for our engines, a RISE program to reduce emissions by 20%, and additive manufacturing to make today's technology more efficient. We're approaching this with urgency and humility. We know time is of the essence, and collaboration is going to be key to our success.
Great. And much of the debate in the ESG space, particularly around climate, has been focused on taking action today, as well as investing over the long term. How is GE approaching this?
Well, Yolanda, a really fair point. Actions are louder than words, and we're making very strong commitments knowing that climate change is an urgent global priority, and we take seriously the opportunity to help solve it. So regarding our own emissions, we've committed to be carbon neutral by 2030. These are the emissions we generate and from the electricity we use, what people call Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. I think it's a really big deal for a large global industrial company like GE, and we're passionate about succeeding in this commitment. Second, we want to go beyond just our direct emissions, and we've set an ambition that includes the products that we sell, that these emissions that are called Scope 3 will be net zero by 2050. We create some of the most technically complex and critical technologies the world needs, and we're focused today on innovating these technologies on a path to decarbonization. I'd love it if you could come see our labs today. You're one of the scientists and engineers. It looks like a time machine in that they're focused on parts of products that maybe 10, 12, 15 years from now, we're going to put into use to be solving these issues, but they're thinking about it today.
It's wonderful. So exciting. Let's switch gears a little bit. Environmental justice is an imperative for the Biden administration. There's a goal to deliver at least 40% of the overall benefits of the federal investments in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities. How is GE really thinking about this?
Thank you for the question. This is a critical part of the discussion around sustainability and other topics, and we support the administration's focus on environmental justice and being a constructive partner towards succeeding in these goals. Sustainability at its core is about equity, that everyone has the same opportunities to thrive, and our mission is building a world that works for everyone. So we're proud of a lot of our work here in environmental justice, but particularly a unique initiative where we're looking at brownfields. These are underutilized properties that need some cleanup, and we're prioritizing our cleanups based on an EPA tool called EJ Screen. It enables us to prioritize properties not so much with commercial value as our top factor, but the percentage of people of color in the neighborhood, children and elderly populations, low-income populations, and other factors, so that we can clean these properties up, restore them for the betterment of the community, and hopefully, help enhance the communities and the environment at the same time. So very proud of this initiative. Hope it gets traction and spreads in broader places as well.
Wonderful. Beyond climate change, overcoming systematic inequality is a key focus of social responsibility. What do you think should be done to address inequality?
Well, Yolanda, again, you're absolutely right. Social responsibility is core to equity, and we want the same opportunities for people to have prosperous and healthy lives. At GE, we're focused on the areas we know best, which is science, engineering, and leadership to address this. One of our commitments, a significant commitment, is to expand the diversity of the pipeline of the next generations of scientists, engineers, and leaders. Earlier this year, we announced a $100 million investment in the Next Engineers programs. We're going to use that to reach 85,000 students in 25 cities globally to help them prepare for college in STEM careers, engineering careers, so that they can be the next generation of leaders and more diversity and social equity there. And this complements our economic inclusion grants, which support minority-owned businesses that compete for business with larger enterprises.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Roger, and thank GE for sponsoring this event.
Thank you, Yolanda. It was an honor and appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you. Now over to my colleague, Ben Gieman.
Thanks, Yolanda. I'm Ben Gieman, energy reporter for Axios. Our final guest is the president of the Environmental Defense Fund, Fred Krupp, joining us from New York City. Hey, Fred.
Hey, Ben, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
Fred, it's Climate Week in New York, where a lot of corporate giants announced their latest emissions pledges, and a lot of these are ambitious, but they're also, the end dates tend to be quite far away, and of course they're non-binding. So what I'd love to learn about is how can we move from these airy pledges to tangible emissions cuts, and what role does the Environmental Defense Fund play there?
Well, I think you're right. It's now almost a business imperative, or truly a business imperative, to announce a net zero pledge. But what you're going to do in 2050 doesn't mean very much. So what we need to do is help these companies, inspire them, and hold them accountable to having near-term action plans. What are they going to do by 2025? What are they going to do by 2030? So the goal setting is important. I don't mean to minimize that, but they need to have specific plans, not only for their own operational footprint, but for their supply chains. And they need to have these interim commitments. And the Environmental Defense Fund is putting a spotlight on that and helping companies to develop those plans.
Definitely. And yeah, it's now very much, as you point out, the sort of coin of the realm for a lot of the world's biggest companies and even many mid-sized companies to have these aggressive targets. One thing that I've been finding interesting lately is that the Environmental Defense Fund, along with other environmental organizations, you've been highlighting, what seems to be a disconnect between what we're seeing in individual corporate boardrooms and the stance of some K Street lobbying associations that these corporations are members of. Can you unpack that for our viewers?
Absolutely, Ben. And, in addition to doing what you can in your own footprint and your supply chain, it's really important that companies add advocacy to get the policies in place that meet them. I think you had a story just a couple of days ago which said that if you add up all these voluntary commitments, as many as there are, even if they're all met, they don't come close to meeting the Paris Agreement. And so, right now, we don't see enough corporations lobbying on behalf of the climate sections of the reconciliation bill. This bill that's pending in Congress is our once-in-a-decade opportunity to get something done on climate. Now, we have some folks. Ivan Gonek is founded Veteran Solar and runs it. It's a small business in Arizona. It's branching out to other states. He's a big supporter of Congress going bold, and he's helping. There's the Clean Energy Business Network with over 500 business groups. They've written to Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader McCarthy to prioritize the clean energy credits, the research and development, and advanced energy infrastructure, the EV charging stations. But last week, the Environmental Defense Fund and other environmental groups wrote a letter to CEOs asking more of them to support the climate provisions. And that's the leadership, we just have to see. This is our moment.
And how's the response to that been? Have you been getting some signs from individual companies that they are perhaps prepared to break with some of their lobbying associations and become more sort of vocal supporters of some of these provisions on Capitol Hill, which, as you point out, come around only very rarely?
It's mixed. Some, yes, are breaking from their trade association. Others are not. I think companies should be aware that all of this is being reported. All of this is in the public record. And those who choose to stay on the sidelines or let their trade association speak for them and are opposing these climate provisions are risking long-term damage to their credibility on climate, long-term damage to their reputations.
Definitely. And of course, we've seen some ruptures that have been fairly public. You've had, I believe, some of the largest oil companies kind of, walk away from some trade associations there. But I wonder if that's perhaps going to become more widespread, either within that industry, or could we see other types of businesses have some type of public break with those associations?
I think over the years, the world has become more transparent. It's impossible to pretend to do one thing when you're really doing another. Of course, we all watched the Exxon video where it became apparent that they were talking one game and doing something else with their lobbying. So I think more and more, Ben, you are going to see companies called out, held accountable, and they increasingly, I think, will have to break from trade associations that are being obstructionist and not trying to create the future that's needed for their businesses to thrive, for you and me to thrive, for all of America, indeed the world, to thrive. We have to act urgently on climate, and businesses have to be a bigger part, especially on advancing the policies we need through governments, because voluntary action, as good as it is, doesn't add up to enough.
And of course, some of those policy discussions are coming to a head kind of right now on Capitol Hill. I wanted to ask, how are you reading the landscape as Democrats look to move these very large clean energy investments and incentives through the budget process? I mean, I know this question probably comes up a lot, but for good reason, because the Senate's, literally evenly split. Can you get Senators Sinema and Manchin on board with some of these robust climate provisions? How do you see that landscape over these next few weeks?
Well, I'm hopeful. They're going to have to make up their own minds, but I'm hopeful. I've had a chance to talk to both of those senators and maybe more. I see an enormous amount of support in the American public for moving ahead with a sort of clean energy economy that are going to create tremendous numbers of jobs, clean the air, make people healthier. And I have seen both Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin engage constructively. So I'm hopeful that at the end of the day, we'll get a good package. But we're very focused, Ben, on whether at the end of the day, whatever package gets passed, and still think it's more likely than not that there will be a package. We're focused on whether independent analysis shows that the emissions reductions realistically that are achieved through reconciliation put us on that path that the president promised to the world, a 50% reduction by 2030. And right now, honestly, the details are still being written. And, the jury is out on how good it's going to be.
And of course, that U.S. pledge is going to be sort of front and center in the very near future at this big United Nations climate conference, this critical United Nations climate conference that's at this point just weeks away. And so I've really got my eye on the clock, right? Because the Beltway process is moving along pretty slowly. And so, I mean, Fred, you're a veteran of these UN climate conferences and how some of the politics and diplomacy work there. I guess what I'm wondering is, what happens at the upcoming conference in Glasgow, Scotland, if the U.S. reconciliation legislation, if these big clean energy investments and policies either is dead or delayed or even just badly watered down? How will that affect the U.S. push for other countries to act on climate if the U.S. can't, in and of itself, sort of show that it can turn these steep pledges into reality?
It would be very damaging to the whole world's ability to come to a good agreement. I have been watching the COPs for all the years we've been having COPs. And when we make progress, one thing is always true, and that is that the United States is leading. And when the United States is not leading or lagging, as it wasn't doing over the last 4 years in the last administration, the COP process doesn't ratchet up ambition. Now is a moment where the United States can and should and must lead. I think the president wants to lead, but it's up to Congress to pass the sort of policies that demonstrate we will meet President Biden's commitment of a 50% reduction by 2030. If for some reason Congress fails to do that, it not only damages U.S. credibility, but it also dampens the likelihood that the world will get the ambition we all need in these times where the impacts of climate have become so clear to everyone on this planet.
Well, Fred, I think you very starkly laid out the stakes for us of what we're going to see unfolding in the days and weeks ahead. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining Axios.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks for your great reporting over many years.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made everyone smarter, faster. Thank you to our sponsor, GE, for making this event possible. And for more information or to sign up for our energy and climate newsletter, Generate, visit axios.com/newsletters or the Axios app. And please join us tomorrow for a conversation on innovative investments in climate tech during Climate Week 2021. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you on axios.com.